Have you ever heard of the expert's paradox? This is something that happens a lot for people who step into an expert role. And often what happens is that they show up valuing and really expanding upon their expertise rather than helping the audience to understand them. Let's dig into that a little bit. I work with a lot of people who identify as experts. They come to me from all walks of life, whether it be science or technology or academia or medicine or so many other fields that require people to know a lot about a lot. I love working with them because they bring such amazing curiosity and brilliance in their fields, and they are expanding their own field with their knowledge. But the challenge that so many of them have is that they value accuracy over understanding. Now, what do I mean by that? When we're working with them on their key messaging, when we're developing, whether it be a stage presentation or a presentation to potential investors, or maybe they're actually going to be on a podcast and they're being questioned. What happens is, as we practice and develop and really refine their messaging, I get a lot of pushback from them on accuracy. And so what happens is they are focused on what they know, and they already know what they don't know. Many of them, this is something that happens so much in our world, where the less we know, the more we think we know. And then the more we know, the less we think we know. And so by the time these experts come to me, they are in that second category. They know a lot, but they also know they don't know everything, and it's important for them and it's important for their audiences. Except that it's not important for their audiences to know in every moment that they're speaking, because this can come across quite disingenuous in many cases, as they are presenting something and bringing us into a level of specificity that is so complex that we're lost. And that is the risk when you value accuracy over understanding. And this is the expert's paradox, because the belief is that through specificity, through accuracy, we gain authority, which isn't the case. Authority is gained when we are able to connect with our audience in a way that says, I know what I know, and I know that I don't know everything. And because of that, I'm going to invite you into my knowledge from a place of curiosity and from a place of your ability to understand it. So I'm going to speak to you from a place of knowing, but I'm going to give it to you in a way that maybe is more general than specific. So I might use story as a way to connect in with you as the audience, to give you examples of what could be a way of understanding my very complex knowledge. Now, that example or that story would help you to generally understand what I'm trying to get across. But it's not going to give you all the specifics of what I know and what I don't know. I'm not going to take you deeply into research. I'll take you at a high level into the research. I might indicate that there is more to that research than I'm telling you right now, but I'm not going to go into that more. Because the point here is to allow yourself, as that expert, to show up in a thought leader mindset. And that thought leader mindset says that you're showing up first with what you know and knowing what you don't know. Second, it's an understanding that your role as a thought leader is to connect with whatever audience you're in front of. And the reason you're doing that is so that they will understand your message in a way that will have them act differently after your message. So that acting differently could be investing in your venture. It could be in showing your information to others so that it gets a wider audience. It could be that they are now going to interact more deeply with you to understand your knowledge and what you're bringing to the industry. So when you show up in that role of an expert with a mindset of a thought leader, what you're doing is you're allowing for understanding first. Now, I'm not saying be inaccurate, and that's really, really important. So I'm not saying that accuracy isn't important. What we're talking about is the specificity of that accuracy. So you're still going to show up and be that thought leader and that expert who knows what they know. You're going to tell that information in a way that is real to who you are and to the authority that you bring to that subject or topic. But what you're not doing is you're not trying to drill down into that information in such a way that it brings out the nuances of where it could be this or that. Again, this is so important because this is where, when I'm working with experts who are in that place of accuracy over understanding, where they lose their audience. I see it often when I'm working with tech professionals who are pitching their businesses to investors, and they really want to talk about their innovation. And of course, look, that innovation is important. Don't get me wrong, the science of it is important. But you've got to get an investor who maybe has heard 20, 30, 50, 100 pitches that day, depending on what's happening in their world. And you've got maybe 5 minutes to get them into your innovation. Now, if you're going to take them specifically into what you've done and try and give them all of those pieces, of course, you're not going to get through that pitch. You're not going to get to your ask. But if you've got a way to take that information and shortcut it into a quick understanding, you've now engaged that investor in a way that they will ask you the questions around the specificity. And that's where you can get specific. So allowing yourself to show up with much more grace and ease at the front of the room is really important as an expert, because it's conveying that presence that is needed as a thought leader, right? This is what we often called executive presence, which is the combination of the authority that you're bringing as the expert that you are, the presence that you're bringing from the mindset you're conveying, and the body language that you are using to show your comfort in who you are. And this comes across to everybody who's listening to you. I have worked with so many experts who, in one or two of these places, are just not comfortable in themselves. They will focus on that point of accuracy. And this comes across often in people who are struggling to claim their expertise with the audience. Maybe they see themselves as being, looking differently than those experts in their field. Perhaps they are different from a gender perspective or from an orientation perspective, or maybe they don't have as much education or they came into the field late. For whatever reason, in their mind, they see themselves as having to be more than everybody else in that audience. And so they step up with this rigid sense of accuracy, believing that when they are very accurate, people will see them different, which is the exact opposite of what they should be doing. Because in reality, when they show up, again, in that place of authority with a thought leader mindset, where they're comfortable in their knowledge and they're not so focused on trying to get that accurate understanding, or that accuracy versus that understanding, where they tell the story generally, they get their audience involved. And from that, they're also using that thought leader mindset where they're okay to tell stories, where they're okay to show up in a very authentic place. They are maybe dressed in a way that is more true to them. Like you see me here with my blue hair. I often get asked, what happens when you're in front of an audience of very, highly paid executives and you are a woman with blue hair? And I say, you know what? In reality, everyone in that audience knows this is authentically me. I don't try and be anyone I'm not. And I've had blue hair for I've had colored hair, let's say, because it does change color often, and as you've probably seen on this channel. But what is true for me is that this is a true expression of me. It is how I see myself. It's how I'm most comfortable. I don't do it because I want attention. I do it because it's me. And so when I'm in front of a room as that expert with a thought leader mindset, I'm using what I know and what I don't know seamlessly. I'm allowing my own knowledge to be conveyed in a way that is true to who I am. I use my stories. You know, I often tell stories about my work life, but I don't often tell stories about my home life. And that's something that probably I'll start doing more of in the coming weeks and months, because I think it's important that you get to know the human. And when we are those experts at the front of the room conveying authority through a thought leader mindset, it is about being vulnerable. And so when we are using our authority and we are open to being understood versus specifically accurate, what we're doing is we're creating change within the audiences who are listening to us. Those audiences are able to connect at different points. When we use storytelling, whether it's from our lives or our careers, it allows us to imagine ourselves in those scenarios. I've talked a lot about that in storytelling. And so if you, as that expert, are giving that information to that audience and they're now imagining themselves in that story and hearing that information said differently, it allows for those aha moments to happen within the audience more often. Or for them to say, oh, I don't quite understand that. Can you tell me more? Now that's a really important indication from your audience. That's not that you were wrong. It's that what you did was you gave them information that maybe changed the way they thought about something. And because of it, they want to be sure they heard it correctly. And they'll ask you a question. Or maybe it did actually give them the wrong impression, but they understood it well enough to be able to ask you that question. And as an expert, if you are so focused on specificity, those questions never come because the person isn't able to access the information in a way that is understandable to them. So they don't actually even know how to ask you questions. Questions are such an important part of the process. So understanding that when you stand in front of the room and claim your place as a thought leader, what you're doing is you're conveying authority through that approachability and vulnerability that allows people to see that you are an expert for sure, but that you're not claiming you know everything. What you're also doing is conveying a comfort level in being that person. You're using your body language. You're using your voice in a way that connects to people so directly. Voice is something that I hear a lot of experts using as a way to convey their authority. They go into what I call the newscaster voice. Suddenly it drops, it becomes very monotone, their face changes, they rarely smile. Now what that does is it says, I'm not comfortable with what I'm telling you. That newscaster voice is not authority. It is clearly, we can all hear it, put on. So use your voice to convey the information. Ultimately, as the expert, it's your job to convey your information in a way that your audience understands it. And so by doing that, you are connecting with them and affecting change for you and for them, and maybe even for your entire industry. Because your knowledge, your expertise, your thought leadership is what needs to be conveyed so that changes can be made in our world. And your knowledge is important. It's what unlocks some of those changes. But that knowledge will never get out there if you're so focused on being accurate versus being understood. So take a step back, have a look at how you convey information. Are you focused on that accuracy? Are you always looking to make sure that it is exactly to the letter of the research or to the letter of the, the document that you're quoting from? Or are you conveying your understanding of it? And in doing that, allowing the audience to connect in with you and maybe ask some questions. And if you are focused on accuracy over understandability, maybe check out some of the tools we've got on how to tell stories and how to convey your information. Because there's some great tools there that will help you to shift your mindset, to step into that thought leader mindset so that you are able to be understood and to affect the change in the world that you want to make. And probably get hired for that consulting gig or create the funding that you want from the venture capitalist who you're presenting to, or maybe step into that CEO role that you've always wanted. Because that's what happens when you shift from an expert into a thought leader mindset and you overcome the expert paradox. I hope this has been helpful for you. And if you found any value in this, make sure that you click the like button below and subscribe to my channel. We give so many more great tips and tricks and frameworks and tools on how to go from being that expert into that thought leader mindset and shifting and transforming our future and your work so that you can create the impact that you want to make.